Hello. Life of the servants in a country house was well ordered. Senior members of the household, steward, cook, butler, housekeeper, governess and tutor, typically wore their own clothes and oversaw the work of more junior servants. In smaller households, jobs may be combined, so the steward might also act as butler. In larger households, the steward, at the top of the servant hierarchy, would have his own room boy and be addressed as Mr. The steward's responsibilities included the household accounts, internal security, discipline and supervision of the male staff. Until it began to change in the mid-18th century, cooks were invariably male. Larger houses might employ specialist undercooks, such as pastry chefs and confectioners. Faced with the need to trim his expenditure, a cash-strapped Duke of Buckingham reacted indignantly to the suggestion that with a French chef and a roasting chef already employed, he might manage without his confectioner, saying, "Good gad, mayn't a man have a biscuit with his glass of sherry?" French cooks became something of a status symbol and increasingly popular in the late 18th century, when revolution in France drove many across the Channel. The butler held the keys to the wine cellar and oversaw laying the table and serving of meals by liveried footmen, and was responsible for the safekeeping and cleaning of silverware and glass. In modest households, if there was no under-butler, he might have to clean the plate himself. During the 18th century, the main meal migrated from between noon and 3 p.m. to evening. At the beginning of the 19th century, all the courses of a meal were put on the table at the same time. By the close of the century, each course was served separately and to each guest individually. Petworth House in West Sussex is still a family home, but has been in the care of the National Trust since 1947. This picture records some of the male servants at Petworth in the household of Henry Wyndham, 2nd Baron Leconfield, around 1870. Liveried footmen, top-hatted lodge-keepers either side of the cook and undercook, and the steward at the back on the right. Male outside servants included gardeners, coachmen and grooms, and gamekeepers responsible for raising game birds and guarding against poachers. The maintenance of formal gardens required a head gardener who was a knowledgeable horticulturalist to manage a team. In the late 19th century, a staff of 22 male gardeners, 2 women and 9 boys were employed at Petworth. At Baron Rothschild's Wadston Manor in Buckinghamshire, at the turn of the 20th century, the garden staff numbered more than 50. Farm workers and local women might be drafted in for weeding duties. Fox hunting increased in popularity among the landowning gentry in the 18th century, requiring hunt and kennel servants in addition to ordinary stable staff. The housekeeper, probably someone who had risen through the ranks and generally addressed as Mrs. whatever her marital status, supervised the housemaids, and if there wasn't a male cook, the kitchen staff as well. The housekeeper was in charge of the household linen, which would be kept under lock and key. Traditionally, keys and handy implements such as scissors and a thimble were kept on a chain worn at the waist on what was known as a chatelaine. Several publications provided tips for running an efficient country house. Famously, Isabella Beeton's Book of Household Management, first published in 1859 and running to many editions, subtitled comprising information for the mistress, housekeeper, cook, kitchen maid, butler, footman, coachman, valet, upper and under housemaids, lady's maid, maid of all work, nurse, the term nanny took over in the late Victorian period, and nursemaid, wet and sick nurses, etc. It also covered sanitary, medical and legal memoranda with a history of the origin, property and uses of all things connected with the home, life and comfort. Many children of country house families were effectively raised by servants. Wet nurses were common in upper-class households. Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, was an exception in the late 18th century in nursing her own children. Housemaids, essentially cleaners, worked long hours, rising early to clean hearths and light fires. A classic housemaid's box contained a bucket with a sieve for ashes and a variety of differently shaped brushes for cleaning discrete areas. According to Mrs. Beeton, the first duty of the housemaid in winter is to open the shutters of all the lower rooms in the house and take up the hearth rugs in those rooms which she is going to do before breakfast. These are some of the duties she goes on to describe. After the shutters are all opened, she sweeps the breakfast room, sweeping the dust towards the fireplace, of course previously removing the fender. She should then lay a cloth over the carpet in front of the stove, and on this should place her housemaid's box, containing black lead brushes, leathers, emery paper, cloth, black lead, and all her utensils necessary for cleaning a grate, with the cinder pail on the other side. She now sweeps up the ashes and deposits them in her cinder pail, which is a japanned tin pail with a wire sifter inside a closely fitting top. In this pail, the cinders are sifted and reserved for use in the kitchen or under the copper, the ashes only being thrown away or emptied into a pail closet. The cinders disposed of, she proceeds to blacklead the grate, producing the black lead, the soft brush for laying it on, her blacking and polishing brushes from the box which contains her tools. The housemaid's box should be kept well stocked. Having blackened, brushed and polished every part and made all clean and bright, she now proceeds to lay the fire. The several fires lighted, the housemaid proceeds with her dusting and polishing the several pieces of furniture in the breakfast parlour, leaving no corner unvisited. Before sweeping the carpet, it's good practice to sprinkle it all over with tea leaves, which not only lay the dust, but give a slightly fragrant smell to the room. It is now in order for the reception of the family. Phew, thank you, Mrs. Beeton. Smaller carpets might be taken outside and beaten rather than swept, using a wooden paddle like a flattened knot. Until the 19th century, maids dressed individually. In the Victorian period, the uniform of print dress for morning, black dress after lunch, starched muslin apron, often with frills at the shoulder, and mob cap with streamers developed. Maids might be given material at Christmas to make their own outfit. Also at the junior end of the scale were laundry maids, and although working outside the house, still under the supervision of the housekeeper, the dairy maid, who was responsible for organising milk for the kitchen, churning butter, and possibly making cheese. Next time, how country house staff were recruited and the introduction of a servant tax. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe buttons and click on the notification bell to be informed when the next video is available, or you can subscribe by clicking on the rose window over my shoulder.